I walked into a small roadside diner after a freezing double shift with just $10 in my pocket and the weight of my mother's medical bills on my mind. As I quietly ate at the counter, I noticed an elderly couple in the corner sharing a single bowl of soup, stretching every bite like it had to last the night. Then I saw the woman counting coins in her palm, and her shoulders dropped when she realized it still wasn't enough. In that instant, I quietly paid their bill and slipped out into the cold before they could see who helped them. What I didn't know was that the couple I had just helped were actually powerful millionaires. And the very next morning, I was suddenly called into the principal's office for a meeting that would change my life forever. The story you're about to hear is a work of fiction, but sometimes the most powerful truths are found in stories that never happened. This is my story. The tips never lied. I had figured this out early, not from any lesson anyone taught me, but from the kind of knowing that grows slowly in a person who pays attention. After washing dishes at Carver's, I had already started quietly tracking what the waitresses slipped me at the end of each night. The register could say whatever it wanted. The tips told the real story. Whether people had felt seen, whether the food had been worth the wait of a hard week, whether walking through that door had been worth it at all. That night, the tip came to $42. I counted the bills a third time under the break room light, a fluorescent that had been flickering because Mike had looked at it once, looked at me, and walked back to his clipboard. A 20, a 10, 2 5s, 2 singles, $42 for back-to-back shifts of cast iron scrubbed until my knuckles ached, for trash bags hauled through the kitchen door into the cold while Mike stood by the pass-through, finding new ways to tell people what they were doing wrong. $42 and $68 still owed on my mother's prescription. I tucked the bills into the envelope in my jacket and pulled my coat on. My shift had ended, and the last bus home was leaving soon. I could wait at the stop and let the cold wind find every gap in my collar, or I could use the folded 10 my mother had pressed into my hand that morning, both her hands wrapped around mine, holding on until I stopped trying to pull away, and walk the blocks to Henderson's Diner on Maple Street in Oakwood. The 10 was separate from the envelope. I kept them that way deliberately. The shift money was earmarked for the prescription, and the 10 was Susan's gift to me specifically for food, for one real meal after a double shift. I had been keeping them in different pockets since morning. "There's a diner on Maple," Susan Mercer had said that morning. She was standing at the kitchen counter in her blue cardigan, not looking at me the way she didn't look at me when she'd already made a decision and was just waiting for me to catch up. "Kelly's daughter works there. You go eat something real after your shift. Mom, the 40 from tonight covers most of the prescription. We'll manage the rest. You're not surviving on instant noodles again, Ryan. I'm fine with noodles." She had turned then and given me the look, the one that meant she had already finished the argument I didn't know we were having. "I know you are," she said. "Go eat anyway." There were battles with Susan Mercer that a person simply did not win. I had been losing them since I was 9 years old and had long since made peace with it. The walk to Maple Street took some time. I kept my pace quick, not because I was in a hurry, but because I had spent enough cold nights moving between jobs and bus stops to have developed a practical relationship with winter. Around me, Oakwood settled into the particular quiet of an evening. Main Street did what it always did. The hardware store lit up honest next to a boarded window next to a barber shop that had outlasted economic downturns on stubbornness and good coffee alone. The library, the VFW hall, with its flag still lit. The corner where the wind would gather itself and hit you like it meant it. I had grown up on these blocks. I knew which porch lights came on at what hour. I knew that Mrs. Polson walked her dog every night, same route, same pace, the route her late husband had walked with her for years, and that she kept walking now because some things you don't stop doing just because the person who started them with you is gone. I liked knowing that about her. It made me feel like I belonged to something that had texture, history, a past that was still present if you knew how to look. I paid attention to most things. My teachers had always said so. Some of them like it was a compliment, some of them like they weren't entirely sure. Henderson's Diner sat at the end of Maple Street like it had been there since before anyone could remember, and had simply decided to stay. Red vinyl booths worn soft at the edges, a counter with spinning stools, a specials board in green dry erase rewritten every morning in handwriting that cared about being read but had given up on being pretty. And the coffee smell. That was the thing, really. It had sunk so deep into the walls over the years that it wasn't really a smell anymore. It was more like a presence, like the building itself was offering something. The bell above the door made its small sound when I pushed it open. The warmth hit me the way it always did after a long cold walk. Not just comfort, but something more than that. Like the world briefly remembering you were in it. I scanned the room the way I always did. A man in a John Deere cap at the counter working through a slice of pie with the focused dedication of someone who had earned it. A woman in nursing scrubs in the third booth, phone face down on the table, staring at nothing with the hollow eyes of someone deep into a double shift. And in the far corner, the booth by the window where the streetlight came through the glass in a pale yellow stripe across the table, an elderly couple. I noticed them the way you notice something that tugs at the edge of you before you can name why. They were sitting close together in a booth that could have held four, taking up less than half the space, sharing warmth the way people do when they have been doing it long enough that it is just breathing, unconscious, automatic, necessary. The man's hands rested on the table between them. Even from across the room, I could see that they trembled. Not badly, not the kind of trembling that makes strangers stare, but enough that when he reached for the menu it took a beat longer than it should have. A small, private struggle that he met without expression and resolved alone. The woman had white hair cut practical and short, and she wore a pale blue cardigan, and she was leaning slightly toward him, speaking quietly. I was already looking away, already moving toward the counter. I wasn't trying to hear, but the diner was quiet at this hour and her voice carried just enough, and the words arrived clearly, without drama, without weight, just the simple weight of truth spoken softly. "We can share one soup, Walter. It's enough." I stopped. Not on the outside. I kept walking, settled onto a stool, accepted the menu. Cassie slid it toward me without looking up, but something inside me went very still. Some gear that had been turning at its regular pace caught on something and held. I knew that voice, not the woman. I had never seen her before in my life. But the tone, the careful, deliberate tone of someone making a small thing sound like a choice when really it is a wall they have run up against, and they have decided quietly and completely that no one is going to see them grieve it. My mother had used that exact voice. The winter after my father left, days until payday, and days left in the month. The refrigerator holding mustard and half a block of cheese and whatever Susan could manufacture out of sheer determination. "We have enough. It's fine." She had said it like if she said it right it would become true. Sometimes it almost did. I ordered the grilled cheese and chicken noodle soup and ate slowly. I wasn't staring, but I was listening. I had always been able to hold two things at once, the conversation in front of me and the one at the edge of the room. The man, Walter, asked the waitress about the pot roast special in the tone of a person who wants something and is quietly doing math about whether wanting it is reasonable. The woman, gently, smoothly, without making it look like what it was, redirected him. "The soup looks wonderful tonight, Walter. It's the one with the egg noodles." Walter let himself be redirected with the ease of a man who either didn't notice or loved her enough to let it go. Cassie brought a small plate of crackers alongside. The woman broke one in half without looking up, without saying a word, and placed half on Walter's side of the shared bowl. Walter's hands settled a little against the warmth. His shoulders came down. They ate the soup slowly, making it last. When Cassie came to my end of the counter to settle up my check, I paid for my meal, $8 and change from the 10 my mother had given me. Cassie counted out my change and set it on the counter, $1 and a few coins. Then I watched the woman at the corner booth open her purse. Dark brown leather worn smooth at the edges. The way things get worn when they have been opened and closed many times over a lifetime. She found the coin section and began to count carefully. The way people count when they are hoping that going slowly will change the answer. I watched her stop. I watched her look at what she had in her palm. And then, just for a moment, just one small breath's worth, her shoulders made a movement so slight you would miss it if you weren't looking. A quiet collapse, a private grief, 1 second long. Then she composed herself back into stillness, and no one in that diner would have seen it, but I saw it. I looked at what was in front of me on the counter. A dollar bill and some coins, my change from the 10, and in my jacket pocket, separate and untouched, the envelope with the $42 from my shift. I sat with it for a moment. The envelope was not mine to give. That was 68 owed and 42 toward it. And I knew the math cold, and I was not going to touch it. But the change from my meal, the dollar and the coins Cassie had just counted out, that was different. That was the remainder of the 10 my mother had given me to eat something real, and I had eaten something real, and what was left had no assignment. I looked at Cassie. She was at the far end of the counter, already moving toward the couple's table with the check in its small leather folder. "Hey," I said quietly. She stopped and looked at me. "What do they owe?" Cassie glanced toward the corner booth and back at me. She understood immediately. The kind of understanding that comes from years of watching people in diners at this hour. She checked the folder. $6.40 with tax. I looked at the dollar and coins in front of me. $1.37 by my count. Not enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. Not the envelope, the other pocket. The one where I kept my transit card and whatever accumulated between shifts. I found a crumpled 5 I had forgotten from earlier in the week, left over from buying a sandwich between my morning class and my afternoon shift. I smoothed it on the counter. 5 plus the $137,637, 3 short of their check. I looked at Cassie. She looked at the money. She reached into her apron pocket without a word and placed 3 pennies on the counter. "Consider it covered," she said quietly. "Keep whatever is left," I said. "There is nothing left," she said. But she was almost smiling. I was out the door before the couple could look up. The bell made its small sound. The cold came for me immediately. It found the gap between my collar and my jaw like it had been waiting right there. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. In my jacket pocket, the envelope, $42 intact. In my other pocket, the transit card, and nothing else. The 5 from earlier was gone. The change from that night was gone. I had spent in total my meal plus $6.37. The loose money, the found money, the money that hadn't had a name. I started walking. I wasn't entirely sure it had been the right call. $6 was still $6 when you were counting carefully, and I was always counting carefully. But the woman's shoulders had made that small movement, and I had seen it, and the money had been there, unassigned. And some decisions don't really feel like decisions. They feel more like recognizing what was already true. By the time the bus stop came into view, something had settled in me that was quieter than the arithmetic. Not peace exactly, more like the specific feeling of having done the thing that was in front of me to do precisely and without excess, and finding that it was enough. I was 17, and I didn't have a clean word for it yet, but it was real, and it was mine, and it walked home with me on the bus and up the stairs and into the apartment where my mother was sitting at the kitchen table, her library book open in front of her and completely unread, waiting for the sound of the door. Susan Mercer had a cup of tea she had made and forgotten, sitting cold beside her elbow, and she looked up the moment I walked in. Years of raising me alone had given her a kind of radar that she never talked about and never needed to. She took in my face in the first second. In the second second, she looked at my jacket at both pockets, reading them the way she read everything about me by now. The envelope pocket, the right shape, the right bulk. The other pocket, the flatness that meant it was empty. She didn't say anything yet. I sat down across from her and told her all of it plainly. The couple in the corner booth. The shared soup. The woman counting coins. The one small moment where her shoulders gave way before pulling back together. The 5 from earlier. The $1.37 from my change. The 3 pennies from Cassie. I put the envelope on the table between us. Prescription money untouched. I said 42. Same as when I left. Susan looked at the envelope, looked at me, picked up her cold tea, registered that it was cold, set it back down. She pressed both hands flat on the table. "Walk me through the money," she said, not angrily. Carefully, I walked her through it. The 10 she had given me, separated from the shift money from the start. $8 and change for the meal. 1.37 change. The 5 I had forgotten was in my pocket. The 3 cents from Cassie, so the prescription money was never in play, she said. No, and the 5 you had forgotten about it, yes. She was quiet for a moment, working through it the way she worked through everything, methodically without drama, making sure she understood exactly what had moved and where. "Okay," she said finally. Her voice had shifted, the careful accounting tone giving way to something warmer and more complicated. "Okay, that is all you're going to say. I am getting there." She looked at me steadily. "What you did was kind, genuinely kind. I want you to know I see that." A pause. "And I want you to know that the fact you kept the prescription money separate, that you were thinking about that from the start, that matters to me. That is not nothing. But," Ryan said, "but $6 is still $6 in this house. You know that. I do. The 5 you had forgotten it existed. If you had remembered it this morning, it would have had a job by now. I know." She looked at me for a long moment. Outside, the cold pressed against the window. The refrigerator kept its steady hum. "She sounded like you," I said quietly. The way she said it is enough, like she was trying to make herself believe it. Susan's expression changed. Then something in it went still and then went soft. "I know that voice," she said. "I know you do." A silence, the kind with weight in it, but not the bad kind. "The pharmacy," Susan said at last, shifting registers the way she always did, from the feeling to the practical, because practical was also a form of love. "Prescription money is here, so the next days are covered. The 5 is gone, but we were not counting on it." She paused. "We are all right. We are careful, but we are all right. I will ask Mike about the weekend shift tomorrow. School first. Mike at 3. "Okay." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. 5 seconds, warm and certain. Then she stood, put her cold tea in the microwave, and stood with her back to me while it ran. "Ryan," I was halfway to the hallway. "What you saw in that woman tonight, that is real, and I am glad you saw it." Her voice was quiet and steady. She still did not turn around, and the way you handled the money, keeping things separate, knowing what was yours to give. "That was right. That is how you do it." She paused. "Just remember that the 5 might not be there next time." "I know," I said. "I know you do," she said. "That is why I am telling you instead of worrying about it." I lay in the dark for a long time that night, looking at the ceiling, turning the evening over in my mind. I thought about Walter's hand steadying against the warmth of the bowl. I thought about a cracker broken in half and placed quietly on the other side without comment, without ceremony, just done, the way you do things you have been doing for years. I thought about 2 people making one small thing last as long as it could. I thought about what my mother had said. That is how you do it. And I turned it over carefully. The way you turn something that has more inside it than it shows on the surface. I thought about the 5 and how close the whole arithmetic had come to not working. I thought about Cassie's 3 pennies on the counter and what it meant that a stranger had quietly completed the math for me without being asked, and how that too was a kind of load-bearing thing. I was 17, and I was still learning how all the pieces fit together. But lying there in the dark with the prescription money safe on my desk, I was not afraid. The morning after Henderson's Diner, I was called to Principal Hayes's office with no explanation, and the walk down that hallway had been full of dread, made worse by the fact that my conscience was clean and I still could not find a reason for it. Through the glass window before I opened the door, I saw them. They looked entirely different from the night before. The man, Walter, sat straight back in the chair, hands folded calmly in his lap, wearing a dark wool blazer with silver cufflinks at the wrists. The trembling was gone. The careful stillness of the diner was gone. What remained was something I had no word for yet. The settled, unhurried presence of a person who has been consequential for a very long time and has grown completely at ease with it. Not arrogance, something quieter and more durable, or the confidence of a man who has made decisions that mattered to a great many people and has made them well for long enough that making them well has simply become what he does. The woman sat with her hands in her lap, and she was looking at the door when I opened it, already looking like she had been watching for me. Her expression had depth behind it, the look of someone who has thought carefully about a moment before arriving in it and is now present in it with everything she has. Through the window behind them, a black sedan in the school lot. I would understand later what it meant. That Walter and Evelyn Whitmore had driven in from Columbus that morning, that a driver had brought them and was waiting outside, that these were people for whom moving through the world required a certain kind of logistics. But the night before they had left all of that in the parking lot, they had walked into Henderson's diner, just the two of them, because they had wanted for 1 hour to be the people they were before the name on their company meant anything to anyone. Principal Hayes stepped out. The door clicked shut. I sat down in the chair Hayes had left, and Evelyn said gently, "Please, we are the ones who owe you a conversation." I sat. "I need you to know," I said, because the silence was starting to have weight, "that I did not know who you were last night. I want that to be clear." "We know," Walter said. His voice was unhurried, the voice of a man who had never needed to fill silence just to feel comfortable in it. "That is precisely why we are here. They told me who they were. Whitmore Capital Group, years building it. The same number of years," Walter noted with a small smile, "as his marriage, which he had decided was either poetic or suspicious, depending on the day." Walter had undergone back surgery some time earlier. The trembling was a side effect of pain medication, already fading. They had been driving home from an anniversary dinner when Evelyn spotted Henderson's diner from the window and asked the driver to stop. "We had not done anything like that in years," Evelyn said. "Just walked into a diner without a reason." Walter thought I was being sentimental. "I thought no such thing," Walter said in a tone that suggested he had thought exactly that. "We did not realize," Evelyn continued, "that we looked like what we looked like to you, which was," I asked, "like people who needed someone to see them," she said. Something about that landed quietly in the room. I let it sit for a moment. "I have been that person," I said. "My mother has. There is a way people sound when they are counting what they have and hoping it is enough. I recognized it. How did you know to leave before we could thank you because you would have been embarrassed and you did not deserve that?" I paused. "I just wanted the thing handled." Evelyn looked at Walter. Walter looked at me. "In the parking lot," Evelyn said, "before we came in, I could see you through the window. You were standing at the bus stop across the street. You stood there for almost 2 minutes in the cold, and I watched you make up your mind." I remembered this exactly. The cold at my back, the light from the diner coming through the glass, warm and yellow, my hands in both pockets, one on the envelope, one on the loose money, sorting out what was spoken for and what was not. "What were you deciding?" she asked. "What I actually had to give," I said. "I had money that was my mother's prescription and money that was loose. I was not going to touch the prescription, but what was loose, I needed to figure out if it was enough to matter. And was it barely?" I said honestly. Cassie had to put in 3 cents. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. The nod of someone who has heard an answer more precise than they expected and finds the precision itself significant. "That," she said, "is when I decided—" "Decided what?" "That you were who we had been looking for." She glanced at Walter, then back. "We have had a scholarship available for just over 6 years. Funded 2 recipients before, but the 3rd slot we left open, we had not found the right person yet." A pause. "You cannot rehearse what you did in that diner. Either that is who you are, or it is not." It felt like the obvious thing, I said. Walter, who had been listening with the focused quiet of a man waiting for a specific note, spoke. Now that he said, is the most important thing you have said to me. We would like to help you, Evelyn said. Not as charity, not as two people who feel guilty about a meal and want to feel better. This is two people who have spent years watching for a specific kind of person. She held my gaze. The kind who figures out precisely what they can give, gives that, and does not wait around to be seen doing it. I wondered the whole way home if I had done the right thing, I said honestly. Walter's real smile came then, not the polite kind, but the kind that rearranged his whole face that started somewhere deeper. Good, he said. That means it cost you something real. The people who never wonder did not actually pay anything. The scholarship letter arrived days later. Full 4-year academic scholarship. Any accredited Ohio university. Renewable on academic performance, funded by the Whitmore Foundation. I read it 4 times. I placed it carefully in the important box between the insurance papers and the birth certificates, where the things that had to be kept safe lived. That evening, Susan made the good chicken, roasted potatoes, and the green beans with slivered almonds that only came out when something deserved marking. We sat at the table for hours and talked about everything that mattered honestly and carefully, the way the two of us always talked when the stakes were real. What do you owe them? Susan asked. Nothing they have asked for, I said. I think they want to see what happens. They have known enough people who had things handed to them. They are curious about someone who did not. Is that okay? It is honest, I said. Honest is okay. I meant it completely. And in the years that followed through the furnace and Mike and the hospital and the second place paper and the Columbus office, I would find that it was also, in ways I could not have predicted, the beginning of everything. The research paper trouble had started some time before the diner on a Wednesday evening in early fall, before any of the rest of it had happened when I submitted my AP history paper through the school's online portal and received a confirmation number that would by the next morning mean nothing. It had been building longer than that. Derek Vance had been sitting behind me in AP American History since September. Derek was the kind of student whose father sat on the school board and whose main interest in AP coursework was how it would read on a transcript. I was the kind of student whose placement in AP anything required a teacher recommendation and an administrative review because I came from the part of Oakwood where those recommendations did not arrive automatically. Mrs. Thompson had written mine in 3 paragraphs, specific and unambiguous, because she had been teaching history for years and had learned to recognize a certain quality of thinking when she found it, and she was not the kind of teacher who let that recognition go to waste. Derek had been registering his feelings about my presence since early October. A comment under his breath that I had been close enough to catch AP is supposed to be hard. I guess they are lowering the bar. The exaggerated surprise whenever I answered something correctly. The particular way Derek told stories at lunch that carried just enough detail to sting and just enough indirection to be deniable. I had responded the way that cost Derek the most with nothing. I absorbed it and went back to my work, which had the effect of making Derek feel invisible in a way that I suspected was genuinely new to him. The research paper had taken some time. I had built it carefully. A case that the decline of American domestic manufacturing between the 1970s and 90s had been partly self-inflicted through the systematic choice of short-term profit over long-term workforce investment. I worked from primary sources, ran the structure by Mrs. Thompson twice, and kept detailed handwritten notes throughout, not as a backup exactly, but because I thought better on paper and had learned to keep the scaffolding even after the building was up. On the evening I submitted, I photographed the submission confirmation screen with my phone before closing the browser. The next morning, the portal showed no record of it. I went to Mrs. Thompson before first period. She brought it to the technology coordinator, Mr. Atkins. Days later, I and Susan sat across a conference table from Vice Principal Carter, Mr. Atkins, and Mrs. Thompson. The conclusion from the technology side, incomplete submission record, failure on the student's end, system update that night, Confirmation numbers could generate without a completed upload. I placed my phone on the table with the submission screen photographed, timestamp visible. I placed the confirmation number printout beside it. "The system log for that evening," I said. "The server-side access log would show every upload attempt with timestamps. I would like to request a formal review of those logs." Carter shifted in his seat. Mr. Atkins looked at his hands. "Accessing those logs requires a formal request through the District Technology Office. I would like to make that request now in writing so there is a record of when I asked." I had prepared a one-paragraph written request that morning and slid it across the table. I have also brought my handwritten outline and drafting notes which I can leave as documentation of the work. Susan said nothing. Her hands were flat on the table. She was giving me the room to handle it, fully present and fully ready if I needed her. Carter looked at Mr. Atkins. What passed between them in that moment was something I filed carefully in the back of my mind. Not proof, not yet, but a shape I recognized. "We will look into the logs," Carter said. "It may take a few days." "I understand," I said. "I would also like a written response to my formal request for my records." The log review came back the following week. Inconclusive. The report stated the system update window had created gaps in the record. The gaps were by a notable coincidence precisely around the timestamp of my submission. I read the report twice. Then I went back to Carter's office alone. "I have read the report," I said. "I would like to escalate the request to the District Technology Office directly since the school-level review was unable to resolve it." Carter looked at me with the expression of an administrator who had been hoping this was over. "Ryan, we are prepared to offer a full extension. I would like the district review and the extension." I said both. "I am not asking for the extension instead of the review." The district-level request went in that afternoon in writing with a copy to Mrs. Thompson and a copy I kept for myself. Weeks later, the District Technology Office responded. The logs could not be recovered due to the update cycle. The matter was closed on their end. I noted the response date, filed the letter, and moved forward. What I learned months later from a conversation in the school hallway that had nothing to do with me was that Derek Vance's older sister worked part-time in the school's technology office. I turned this over for several days. I thought about the inconclusive log review. I thought about the gaps at the precise timestamp. I thought about what I could prove versus what I now understood. The answer to the first question was nothing. The answer to the second question had a shape I recognized clearly. I had put my objection on the record at every level available to me. I had made the cost of the interference visible to anyone who looked at the paper trail. There was nothing further I could do that would not simply spend energy without result. I filed it in the part of myself where I kept things that were true but not useful, and I turned back to the work. I rewrote the paper in some time, not because this time I went back to my primary sources and pushed the argument further than the first version had gone, following threads I had been cautious about before. Being forced to question every paragraph had improved everything it touched. In January, without telling me in advance, Mrs. Thompson submitted it to the state academic competition. The paper placed second in the state. I found out when the letter arrived at school, and Mrs. Thompson slid it on my desk during third period without a word and went back to the whiteboard. I looked at the letter. I looked at the back of her head. "Mrs. Thompson, we are on Reconstruction, Ryan." I put the letter in my folder and opened my notebook. But for the rest of that class, something in me was very quiet and very full. Not about the award, really, but about the understanding that someone had seen what the work was worth and had acted on it without asking permission, without making anything of it, simply because it was the right thing to do. I was beginning to understand that this quality was rarer than it should be. December came in quietly, and some days before Christmas on a Tuesday night, the furnace gave out. It did not go dramatically. It just stopped the way important things often fail. Not with a crash, but with a slow, steady absence, a warmth that was there, and then was less there, and then was not there at all. I noticed it first at night. By midnight, the temperature inside the house had dropped. We moved every blanket in the house to the living room, opened the oven door, heated water on the burner for something warm to hold. We made a kind of camp of it. Susan on the couch, I on the floor with my back against it. And we did not say much because there are situations where talking about the situation is just spending energy you need for managing it. Outside, the cold had the patient quality of something that had nowhere else to be. Inside, I lay awake after Susan drifted off and thought about the cardiology bill from September sitting in the important box just under the scholarship letter. We had a payment arrangement with the billing office. Installments, manageable amounts, current as of last month. It was not a crisis. It was a slow accumulation that required watching. A number in the back of my mind that I kept there the way you keep a problem in view when you have not solved it yet, but intend to. The landlord expressed sympathy over the phone the next morning. The repairman came days later, charged a service fee, and left with the news that a part needed to be ordered, 1 week minimum. I worked my shifts at Carver's, studied at the library where it was warm, said nothing about the furnace at school. Mid-December, Walter called to check in the way he had started doing every few weeks. Easy, unhurried, the kind of calls that never felt like obligation. I found myself being honest in them the way I was honest with my mother and almost no one else. "The furnace is out," I said. "Days now." A pause. "Are you warm enough?" "We are managing." "That is not the same thing as warm enough." "No," I admitted. "It is not. The foundation has an emergency fund specifically for I know. I want to figure this out myself first. If I hit a real wall, I will call." The silence from Walter's end was careful, not frustrated, not pushing, just the quiet of a man honoring a decision he might personally have made differently. "There is no merit badge for preventable suffering," Walter said. "It is not about a merit badge. It is about knowing I tried the real thing first." "What is the real thing?" "My own hands," I said simply. Another pause. Longer, then, "All right, I will be here when the wall comes." The part arrived on day 10. The repair cost $112. The landlord declined to cover it. The lease language, he said, was subject to interpretation. Susan spent Sunday afternoon at the kitchen table with the lease, a highlighter, and a legal dictionary borrowed from the library. The following Tuesday morning, she filed a small claims complaint before work. Weeks later, Judge Holt, a tired woman who had been hearing these cases for years, awarded Susan the $112 plus filing fees without deliberating long. Susan put the check in the account that Friday and made the good chicken, roasted potatoes, the green beans with slivered almonds. She and I ate and talked for 2 hours, easy and unhurried, and neither of us mentioned the furnace once. It was behind us. The marking was for what it held, not what had broken. Weeks into the new year, Mike called me into the small office off the Carver's kitchen and reduced my hours. That was the word Mike used, reduced. He said it twice, and both times he looked at the wall calendar rather than at me. A tell I had learned to read with some accuracy after months of working for a man who communicated through avoidance more fluently than through speech. "Business slows in the fall," Mike said. "We are in January. We are tightening up across the board. What does reduced look like hours-wise?" Mike moved a pen from one side of his desk to the other. "We will be in touch when we need you." I sat with that for a moment. "We will be in touch when we need you" was not reduced hours. I knew what it was, and I knew how I knew. I had spent enough of my life learning to hear what people meant underneath what they said. "Mike," I said, "there is a hiring sign in the front window. I saw it when I came in." Mike looked at the calendar. "We are restructuring the position." "Okay." I stood. "Thank you for the opportunity." I collected my last check from Lisa at the register on my way out. She squeezed my arm as I passed quickly, not looking at me, and I nodded and kept walking. Outside in the January parking lot, the cold settled around me, and I stood for a moment looking at the hiring sign through the glass. I was not angry. I was something quieter and more complicated than angry. The specific exhaustion of recognizing that certain things happen to you not because of anything you did wrong, but because of the column someone decided to put you in. And the most honest response is to see it clearly. Refuse to let it become the story you tell about yourself, and keep moving. My phone buzzed before I reached the corner. Lisa. I am sorry, Ryan. This was not about your work. He never said a word about the work. I figured he found out you had been going to Columbus. He said he does not need someone with one foot out the door. A pause. And he said, I am sorry. He said he does not need someone who thinks they are better than the job. I stood still on the sidewalk. I never thought I was better than the job. I said, I know. I showed up every shift. I did the work. I know you did. It is not right. No, I said, but thank you for calling. Take care of yourself, Lisa. That night, I told Susan. She went through her process. The stillness, the specific temperature of her silence, the hands eventually flat on the table. When she was done, we spread the numbers out between us, the way we always did, with the precision of two people who had been doing this long enough to know that looking clearly at hard things without flinching was its own kind of skill. The scholarship would not begin until September. 8 months. Groceries, utilities, the prescription co-pays, the cardiology appointments. Dr. Mitchell had moved to monthly after the September episode. The medical payment arrangement, currently $300 a month, a number we had negotiated carefully with the billing office and were meeting, but only just bus fare. The landlord situation still simmering. We needed more than was currently coming in. We could, Susan began. I know what you are going to say. No, she looked at me. Walter and Evelyn are not the answer to every hard thing, I said carefully. They have offered. I am grateful. But if I call them every time the money gets tight, then what we have becomes something different. It becomes need. I do not want that to be what it is. Ryan, there is nothing wrong with needing. I know there is not. I just want to find out what I am capable of first before I lean on anyone else. I paused. Let me find out. Susan looked at me for a long time. Then she turned the notepad toward me and picked up her pen. Okay, she said. Then let us find out. By the end of the week, I had picked up morning shifts at the gas station on Route 96 to 10, 4 days a week. A slot that had just opened up on top of both days at the Kroger on Elm, where I had been working weekends since fall. Together, the two jobs covered the gap left by Carver's, provided nothing unexpected happened. Walter and Evelyn had been watching. I understood this in January, weeks after the scholarship letter arrived, the same month the state competition results came back, when Evelyn called and asked if I would like to visit their Columbus offices. Not a formal meeting, she said, just a visit. Walter wanted to show me around. I took the bus on a Saturday. The Whitmore Capital offices were 3 floors of an unremarkable building in a Columbus business district. Not the marble and glass performance of wealth, but functional. Lived-in space with the slightly worn quality of a place where real work happens. People moved between desks with purpose. Arguments broke out in the open. Constructive and energetic. The way arguments sound when people care more about getting it right than being right. Whiteboards covered in half-finished ideas. Coffee cups on every flat surface. Walter walked me through it the way a craftsman walks you through something they built. Not showing off, just showing. He introduced me to 5 or 6 people along the way, each of whom stopped what they were doing, gave me their real attention for a few minutes, asked me something sharp, and went back to work. Walter introduced me the same way each time. This is Ryan Mercer, a student we have gotten to know. Nothing more. No setup, no signal about how to treat him. I understood this was deliberate. What you do when you are introduced as nothing particular says more than what you do when you are introduced as something impressive. After the tour, a small conference room, 2 coffees, Walter sat across from me and looked at me directly. The way Walter did everything without hurry, without pretense. I want to ask you something straight, Walter said. And I want a straight answer. All right. When Mike let you go, you thought about calling us. It was not a question. I answered it like the statement it was. Yes. Why did not you? Because I needed to know I could handle it, not to prove something to you for myself. I worked through the thought as it came, and because I did not want what we have to turn into something I draw on every time things get hard, that would change it. What is it? Something real, I said. Something that is not about what I need from you. I want to keep it that way. Walter was quiet for a moment, measuring, not thinking. The look of a man who has spent decades listening for the difference between what people say and what they actually are. Then he told me what he and Evelyn had built over years. Not just the company, not just the returns, but the idea underneath it. That the people who hold things together are the ones who do the hard, right thing when it costs them something real, when no one is watching, when there is nothing guaranteed on the other side. That these people are rare. That when you find them, you invest in them completely. That every institution and every community is only as strong as its load-bearing walls, and the walls are always people. I am telling you this, Walter said, because I want you to understand why we are interested in you. Not as charity, not as philanthropy in the usual sense. We think you are one of those walls, and walls need room to grow strong before the weight comes. What if you are wrong about me? I asked. Walter considered this like the real question it was. Then we will have made a mistake. We have made them before. He held my gaze steadily, but I have been reading people for a long time. I trust what I am seeing. The bus home took some time through the flat January gray of Ohio fields and sky the same color. I spent most of it looking out the window, thinking about what it means to be seen accurately by someone with no reason to see you at all. I thought about the woman in the pale blue cardigan. I thought about the 5 and the 3 pennies from Cassie and the precise, unplanned arithmetic of that night. I thought about how a small, careful thing, not reckless, not theatrical, just honest, had somehow become the hinge that everything afterward was swinging on. I was beginning to understand something, that the important things almost never arrived with any announcement. They came quietly in diners and break rooms and the back seats of county buses. You could only catch them if you were already paying the right kind of attention. I had been paying that kind of attention my whole life. I just had not known it had a name. Susan's second cardiac episode came on a Tuesday in March, and I was in the Kroger stockroom when my phone buzzed. The cardiologist's office. I had that number memorized. The way you memorize things that might matter at any second, kept close, kept ready, just in case. I answered. The nurse spoke carefully with the measured calm of someone who delivers hard news many times a day and has learned that pace is a form of mercy. Arrhythmia, event significant. Susan had called 911 herself. She was conscious ambulatory at Oakwood Regional. I told my manager. Phyllis took one look at my face and waved me out without a word, already reaching for the schedule with her other hand. I was at the hospital in some time. Susan was in a second-floor room attached to monitors, looking at the monitors with the specific expression she wore when she found medical necessity personally inconvenient. She was pale, in a way that I noted and filed away carefully, putting it in the place where the things I could not afford to feel right now went to wait. I am fine, she said when I walked in. I can see that. The nurse keeps taking my blood pressure. Outrageous. I sat in the chair beside her bed and put my hand over hers, and we stayed like that for a while without talking. The monitors kept their rhythm. The afternoon light came through the window at the particular angle of mid-March in Ohio, remembering warmth. Not quite there yet. Dr. Mitchell arrived at 4. The same quiet, unhurried man I had met twice before. He was clear and direct. The arrhythmia had been significant. The medication regimen needed adjustment. They were moving to bi-weekly monitoring. One of Susan's prescriptions was being switched to a newer formulation that insurance had not fully processed yet. An additional $90 a month out of pocket for at least 6 months. On top of the existing payment arrangement with the billing office, which had been running at $300 a month and still had just over $2,000 remaining, so the monthly obligation goes up by $90. I said, approximately, we will have more clarity when the formulary review completes and the payment arrangement. Can that be renegotiated if the monthly number stops being workable? Dr. Mitchell wrote down the name of the patient advocate in the billing office and slid it across. "She is good," he said. "Talk to her." I thanked the doctor and sat with Susan until 8 when she told me in the tone she used when a decision was final to go home and sleep. I kissed her forehead and went in the parking lot. I stood for a moment in the March cold, the kind that still had winter underneath it, and ran the numbers in my head. Current monthly, gas station and Kroger shifts combined, minus rent, utilities, groceries, prescriptions, the payment arrangement. The new 90 pushed the monthly math past what I could cover without cutting something that could not be cut. The scholarship started in September. That was 6 months. It was not impossible, but it required everything going right. And I had been in this life long enough to know that everything going right was not a plan. I called Evelyn. I told her everything. The episode, the new monitoring schedule, the medication change, the $90 additional, the payment arrangement, and where it stood. I told it plainly without editorializing the way I told important things. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" she asked. "I need to think clearly, and I am not thinking clearly right now." "That is fair." "I have been managing the medical payment plan myself," I said. "We have been current, but 90 more a month changes the math past what I can cover without help." A pause. "I have been avoiding asking the foundation for anything because I wanted to handle it myself. But I am standing in a parking lot outside my mother's hospital room, and I think I have been confusing 2 different things." "What 2 things?" "Proving I can handle things and actually handling them." I paused. "One is about me, the other is about making sure she is okay." "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "That is exactly the distinction. Walter told me in December there is no merit badge for preventable suffering. He said it to me too," she said warmly more than once. "He tends to be right about it." "I would like to talk to the foundation about a structured arrangement," I said. "Not a gift, something with accountability built in that covers the gap between now and September. I want to know what I am receiving and why, and I want to report back on where things stand." "That is exactly how the provision is designed," Evelyn said. "Call the patient advocate at the billing office tomorrow morning. The foundation will follow up with her directly." The following week, I sat in the patient advocate's office, a small woman named Renata, who had a wall of thank you cards behind her desk, and the matter-of-fact warmth of someone who has helped a great many frightened people find their footing. Together, we restructured the payment arrangement, lower monthly installments over a longer period with a letter of support from the Whitmore Foundation as backing for the revised terms. The foundation covered the additional $90 monthly for medication dispersed directly with a quarterly check-in. It was not a cleared balance. It was a floor carefully placed that let me keep standing. Susan received the notification about the revised arrangement by mail. Days later, she called me at school. "How does it feel?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "It feels," she said slowly, "like being able to breathe. Like I had forgotten that was something a person could just do, and someone reminded me." I stood in the hallway outside the library and thought about a woman in a pale blue cardigan, saying, "It is enough," in the voice of someone trying hard to make it true. I thought about what a $5 bill forgotten in my jacket and 3 pennies from a waitress and a careful accounting of what was truly mine to give had eventually made possible. "That is what you gave them," Susan said in the diner. "Not everything you had, just what you could actually afford. And somehow that was still enough to start all of this." I did not know it would be that large a thing. I said, "The person drowning does not know the rope is a big deal." Susan said, "That is the whole point of a rope." The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in February, in an envelope that had a particular weight to it. The kind you register before you open it, holding it in both hands in the cold by the mailbox. Not quite ready yet. Ohio State University, Office of Admissions. I took it inside, set it on the table, called Susan at work. "There is an envelope," I said. "Open it," she said immediately. "You are not here. Ryan Carter Mercer." Open the envelope. I opened it, read the first paragraph twice. Not because I doubted it, but because my brain insisted on doing its due diligence before allowing me to feel anything at all. "I got in," I said. Seconds of silence on Susan's end. Full program. Full program, economics, honors cohort. I paused. There is a note from the admissions director. It says, "My application represented some of the most genuinely original thinking they encountered in this cycle's review." What Susan made then was not a word. It was the sound of a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told she can put it down. There is not really a word for it. Language tends to fall short of the things that matter most. "Mom," I said. "I am fine," she said in a voice that was not remotely fine. "I know. Go call Evelyn before anyone else." "Go," I called Evelyn. She picked up on the first ring. "Ohio State," I said. "Full program, honors?" A pause, then slightly away from the phone. "Walter." He got in. Walter's voice, distant. "Of course he did." Evelyn came back. "Walter said this in December after your call from the hospital parking lot." He said, "That boy just figured out the last thing he needed to figure out. He is ready." What did he mean? He meant you learned the difference between proving something and building something. Those two things can look the same from the outside for a long time, but they lead to very different places. A pause. "You chose the right one." The graduation from Oakwood High came in June on a Friday evening when the Ohio sky was the kind of blue that only happens in late spring, clear and unhesitating, like it was making a statement. The gymnasium had been decorated with streamers and goodwill and a hot glue gun. I sat in the third row between Amy on my left and Marcus on my right, two people I had known since 5th grade, both doing the right thing with their lives in the way the right thing looks different for everyone. In the bleachers, my mother in the blue dress from the consignment shop on 4th Street bought in April and worn to exactly one fitting before tonight. Mrs. Thompson, who had driven over and was watching with the focused attention of someone who will not miss a single word. They had exchanged letters twice over the course of the year, brief and precise, the kind that say more than they use words for, and the correspondence had become something neither of us had named, but both of us kept. Mike, from Carver's near the back, which surprised me for a moment, and then did not. Mike was imperfect and had acted small and had also given a 16-year-old with no experience a job and never once talked down to me while I had it. Cassie from Henderson's Diner, who had kept her word. And in the 4th row, Susan, Evelyn, and Walter. Walter had arrived minutes before my name was called, slightly winded from wherever he had parked, looking completely pleased with himself. Susan shook her head at him, warm, tired, fond, the particular headshake she reserved only for Walter, the kind that had grown over months of phone calls and shared meals and one hospital waiting room into something that looked unmistakably like family. 2 seats down in the 3rd row, Derek Vance sat with his shoulders set in the way of someone who has spent a year in a room with a person and has never quite worked out how to acknowledge them. He did not look at me. I did not look at him. There was nothing left to resolve between us, and we both felt it. And the feeling itself was a kind of ending, quiet and sufficient. When my name was called, I walked to the podium. "I want to tell you something true," I said. The gymnasium went quiet. I told the story plainly. The couple in the corner booth, the woman in the pale blue cardigan, the moment her shoulders gave way for one small breath and pulled back together, the money in my 2 separate pockets, the 5 from earlier, the 137, Cassie's 3 pennies. I told it without performance the way I told things when they were real. "I have spent this whole year," I said, "being asked whether I would have done it differently if I had known who they were. And honestly, I do not know. I want to believe I would have done the same thing, but I cannot be certain. And I think that uncertainty is worth being honest about because the point is not that I'm a good person. The point is what it costs to act like people matter when you are not sure anything is coming back to you." I paused. I have also been tested this year in ways I did not recognize as tests while they were happening. Losing a job I needed. A furnace breaking in December, my mother in a hospital bed in March. A paper I worked weeks on vanishing overnight. I let that sit. None of it broke the important things, and I have been trying to understand why. There is an idea I keep coming back to about what holds things together. Institutions, communities, families. The idea is that they are held by the people who do the hard, right thing when it costs them something real, not the comfortable thing, the hard one. When no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed, a pause. Those people are the load-bearing walls. Everything else is just structure. I looked at the fourth row. Susan had both hands pressed to her mouth. Evelyn's eyes were bright and still. Walter was nodding slowly, deliberately. The nod of a man hearing something true said in the words it deserved. "I once gave what I could actually afford for a stranger's dinner," I said. "Not everything I had. I knew what was mine to give and what was not, but what was mine I gave. And in return I was offered a future I never imagined." I paused. The truth is, I did not change their lives. They changed mine. The only thing I did was let them see it was worth changing. 4 years later, on a Saturday in May, when the Ohio sky was making the same argument about beginnings that it made every spring, Ryan Carter Mercer walked across the commencement stage at Ohio State University and accepted his diploma in economics with a concentration in community development with honors at 21 years old. 2 research papers in peer-reviewed journals before graduation, an achievement my advisor, Dr. Harmon, described with the frugality of a man who believed genuine praise should be genuinely scarce as uncommon. 2 summer internships in community investment through the Whitmore Foundation, a GPA of 3.8, a small group of real friends built around shared work rather than shared convenience, and a call to my mother every single day without exception. A habit Susan called excessive and showed no interest in having me change. Susan was well. Her health had stabilized significantly, and Dr. Mitchell had moved her from closely monitored to routinely monitored. She had been promoted at the insurance office to senior account coordinator, which meant she was the person everyone brought their hardest problems to, which was, I had always thought, exactly the job she had been doing unofficially her whole life. The medical balance had been paid off in full the previous November. The last installment made on a Tuesday morning. Susan at the kitchen table with a check and her reading glasses and the particular quiet she went into afterward that meant something had been finished and could now be set down. She was in the fourth row of the Ohio State commencement ceremony in the same blue dress worn to Oakwood graduation 4 years ago and again today, because she had decided that some dresses were for all the days that mattered. And this was that kind of dress. Evelyn was beside her, silver hair bright in the May light. Walter had parked his own car, a habit he developed and defended as personal philosophy, which Evelyn had long since accepted was non-negotiable, and arrived in the row minutes before my section was called. Slightly winded, entirely self-satisfied, Susan shook her head at him. Warm, fond, Walter sat down, adjusted his jacket, and looked toward the stage. Mrs. Thompson was 7 seats down in the same row, having driven up from Oakwood without telling anyone. She had sent me a card the week before. Just 5 words. "I will be watching. I know." I understood exactly what she meant. After the ceremony, in the joyful chaos of the May afternoon outside the auditorium, 100 futures all beginning at once. Flowers and photographs and the particular noise of a day that had been anticipated so long it started becoming memory before it was even over. Susan reached me first. She held me the way mothers hold their grown sons at graduations, briefly, completely without apology for either. Then she stepped back and I looked at Evelyn and Walter. Walter extended his hand. I took it. Walter held it a moment longer than a handshake required. The way certain older men hold a young person's hand when they want to say something that does not need words. "Well done," Walter said, just that he had learned over years that the right 2 words said plainly were worth more than 10 sentences trying to be adequate. Evelyn was looking at me with the expression I had first seen in Principal Hayes's office 4 years ago. That depth behind her eyes, the look of someone fully present in a moment they had been waiting for. "I want to ask you something," she said. "All right, what are you going to do now?" I had been asked this many times in the past month and had given different versions to different people. For Evelyn, I gave the real one. I have been offered a position at the Community Development Institute in Columbus Research and Fieldwork entry level. I am going to take it. I paused. I want to spend a few years learning how this actually works before I try to do it somewhere that matters to me personally. I want to earn the standing. Evelyn tilted her head. And eventually, when I have built something real, when I actually know what I am doing, I want to go home to places like Oakwood from inside, living there, being part of it. Not flying in with a report and flying out because you were made by one, Evelyn said. Yes, I said, and I want to understand it well enough to help others like it. Walter had been listening with his particular stillness. Now he spoke. The foundation has been building toward a community initiative, he said. 5 pilot communities in Ohio. We are still 2, maybe 3 years from being ready to launch it properly. He paused. We have been thinking about who should run it. I am not ready for that yet, I said. Walter's real smile arrived. The one that rearranged his whole face, that started somewhere deeper than manners. The smile of a man who has been patient for a very long time and is watching the patience resolve into everything it was supposed to be. I know, Walter said. That is exactly the right answer. The Community Development Institute is a good place to start, Evelyn said. And we would like to stay connected as you build, not as supervisors, but as people who are available when you want to think something through. And in 2 or 3 years, when the initiative is ready and you have done the work to be ready, we will have a real conversation. That is a good plan, I said. It is an honest one, Walter said, which is the only kind worth making. Across the lawn, Mrs. Thompson had found Susan, and the 2 of them were deep in the kind of conversation that happens when 2 women have been exchanging notes on the same person for years and finally have the chance to compare directly. Doctor. Mitchell caught my eye from some distance away and gave me a single nod. The nod of a man who makes assessments for a living and has made one he is satisfied with. I moved to Columbus that fall into a small apartment on the east side with a window that looked out on a parking structure and a kitchen barely large enough to turn around in. I started at the Community Development Institute in September. Field researcher entry level, doing the work of learning how communities function by spending time in them. Hours in community center meeting rooms and school board hearings and conversations on front porches. Learning to ask questions that let people answer honestly. Getting things wrong and figuring out why I was good at it, I got better. 2.5 years later, on a Tuesday evening in November, I drove back to Oakwood on Route 9 for the first planning meeting of the Whitmore Foundation's Ohio Community Initiative, the first of the 5 pilot communities and the one I had asked specifically to be assigned to. I had made the case to Walter and Evelyn 6 months earlier in a conference room in Columbus with a 30-page proposal I had spent weeks writing. The case was simple. I knew this community, I had been made by it. I understood its load-bearing walls from the inside, not from a report. They had agreed with conditions, quarterly reviews, an advisory board, clear metrics, the kind of accountability structure that made the work real rather than just well-intentioned. I pulled into the lot at Henderson's Diner on Maple Street. Same bell above the door, same warmth coming out to meet me, same coffee smell deep in the walls. Cassie behind the counter. Hair a little shorter, looking up with the expression of someone who has been holding the end of a story and has just seen the person it belongs to walk through the door. Ryan Mercer, she said. Hi, Cassie. I wondered when you would be back for real. I sat at the counter. I am back for real. She slid me a menu. I ordered the grilled cheese and chicken noodle soup without looking at it. I looked at the corner booth empty tonight, but I looked at it the way you look at a place where something real happened. Not with sentiment exactly, not with drama, but with the quiet recognition that this specific unremarkable corner of this specific unremarkable diner had been on one November Thursday evening, the place where a small and careful decision had started something much larger than it looked. I thought about all the Henderson's diners in all the towns across Ohio, all the corner booths, all the people in pale blue cardigans making small things last, saying it is enough in the voice of someone trying hard to believe it. All the kids working out the arithmetic of what was theirs to give and what was not. Finding the line and giving up to it, I ate my soup slowly, paid my check, left a tip that made Cassie look up from the register with wide eyes. I stepped out into the November night, cool and sharp, smelling of turned earth and the complicated smell of a place that is yours, not because you own it, but because it made you, and you carry it into every room you walk into for the rest of your life. I stood on the sidewalk on Maple Street and looked at the town around me, the patchwork of lights, the barber shop that had outlasted everything, the library dark for the night, the corner where the wind would hit hardest come January. I thought about load-bearing walls, about how they never announce themselves, about how you become one, not through a single dramatic act, but through years of showing up, learning the work, being present in the specific place that needs you, about how the becoming is most of the story and the moment in the diner was only the first page. I started walking and the night was cool and Oakwood was dark and lit and full of people doing the ordinary things that hold the world together. And somewhere out ahead of me was the work, not the beginning of it anymore, but the middle of it, which is where most of the real things happen. I was not in a hurry. I walked. Some people will tell you that small acts of kindness do not change the world, that the math does not work, that a $5 bill and a 137 and 3 pennies from a waitress is a gesture, not a movement, and that gestures do not fund scholarships or rebuild communities or alter the course of a young man's life. Those people are not wrong about the math. They are wrong about everything else. Because the math, it turns out, is not what you are actually doing when you sit at a diner counter and work out what is yours to give and what is not and give what is yours and slip out the door before anyone can make it about you. You are not doing arithmetic. You are doing something older and more stubborn than arithmetic. You are insisting quietly, carefully, at real cost in a room where no one required it of you, that the person across the room is worth the price, that their hunger is your business, that their dignity is somehow connected to yours in ways you cannot fully trace but can absolutely feel, and sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes that insistence lands in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment and becomes the beginning of something you could not have planned. Not the end of the story, the beginning. I spent the years after that beginning doing the work that beginnings require, slowly, carefully, making mistakes and correcting them. Building the understanding that can only come from being inside a place and staying. I thought about Henderson's diner often, about the flickering light in the cold and the woman in the pale blue cardigan, making one small thing last, about the 5 I had forgotten was in my pocket, and the 3 pennies Cassie had placed on the counter without being asked, and what it meant that kindness so often works that way, imprecise, collaborative, the math completed by strangers. I thought about how a $5 bill and some loose change had been enough, how it had always been exactly enough, how that in the end was the whole story. Sometimes a life changes not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet moment no one else notices. I gave only what I could spare, just a few forgotten dollars and a little courage. But that small kindness opened a door neither side expected. It lifted the dignity of one couple and revealed the strength inside a young man still learning who he was. That is how change begins, quietly, human to human. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Looking back on that freezing November night at Henderson's Diner in Oakwood, my heart still tightens with the same raw emotion I felt as a 17-year-old kid named Ryan Mercer scraping by on double shifts to help my mom Susan with her medical bills. I had so little. Just a crumpled 10 she pressed into my hand for one real meal and the $42 I'd sworn to keep untouched for her prescriptions. Yet, when I saw Walter and Evelyn in that corner booth, sharing one bowl of soup and her shoulders sinking in that quiet, private grief as the coins fell short, something inside me simply knew. I gave what I could truly spare, those loose dollars and Cassie's 3 pennies, without waiting for thanks or recognition, because their dignity mattered more than my comfort in that moment. That single, careful choice taught me the most valuable lesson life has ever handed me. Real kindness isn't about how much you have or the grand gestures that get applause. It's about paying attention to the hidden struggles around you, giving exactly what you can from a full heart even when it costs something personal, and walking away before anyone turns it into a show. It showed me we're all connected through these quiet acts of humanity, that one small gift of seeing someone else can become the foundation for futures none of us could plan. Years later, that night opened doors to a scholarship, to Ohio State, to building something real in communities just like Oakwood, proving that the strongest walls in any life are the ones we become for each other when no one's watching. If this story stirred something deep in your own heart like it still does in mine, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time a small kindness changed everything for you, or what moment here hit you hardest. And if these heartfelt stories about ordinary people doing the right thing move you too, please hit subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Your support keeps these real, life-changing tales alive. Thank you for being here with me.